Ladies and gentlemen, the Harare Agricultural Show is opening this weekend and President Ramaphosa will be the guest of honor. But for today, we are going to take a break from Zimbabwe's absurdity and we are going to take a flight to the Equatorial Guinea. Here we find Baltasar Ebang Engonga, a name most people outside of the Equatorial Guinea probably never heard before last week. But now it's plastered across headlines for all the wrong reasons. On paper, the story looks very familiar. Another government official sentenced to jail for embezzlement, 8 years this time for pocketing a modest 250,000 US dollars. If you live in a country like Zimbabwe, South Africa, or anywhere where corruption is a sport, you already know that that figure is laughably small. In fact, $250,000 in Equatorial Guinea's ruling circles is what they might call pocket change. The kind of money you lose between the cushions of your imported Italian leather sofa. If the government there started arresting people for stealing that amount, they would have to jail the entire cabinet, parliament, and probably a few cousins of the president for good measure. So, why is Engonga the unlucky one? Why him? Out of the hundreds of sharks swimming in the same pond of oil money, patronage, and plunder? Well, buckle up, ladies and gentlemen, because this story takes us out of the boring world of missing funds and into a scandal so bizarre, so reckless, and so humiliating that it rattled the system to its core. Engonga wasn't just another corrupt official with sticky fingers. No, his crime was much more dangerous. He had a hobby, one that makes reckless look like an understatement. He filmed himself sleeping with women. Not one, not 10, not even 50, but over 400. 400 different women. Let that sink in. If you try to watch all those tapes back to back, you'd need more than a month of uninterrupted screen time. And before you start thinking, well, that's his private life, here is where it gets politically suicidal. Many of those women were not just ordinary lovers. They were wives, sisters, cousins, and daughters of the most powerful men in the country. Generals, ministers, ruling party bigwigs, and possibly even people close to the first family itself. Now, in most countries, powerful men can tolerate a lot. They can tolerate you stealing money as long as they get their cut. They can tolerate you driving fancy cars, showing off your wealth, and even bullying the poor. But one thing they cannot tolerate is humiliation, especially not in front of each other. Engonga didn't just cross a line, he obliterated it. By documenting his bedroom conquest with people directly tied to the elite, he wasn't just enjoying himself, he was mocking them. He was holding a private collection of humiliation, a catalogue of sins that turned their carefully guarded image of power into a state night comedy. And here's the part that makes the whole thing insane. He kept the evidence. Hundreds of recordings neatly stored on his devices like a library of political suicidal notes. When the police stumbled upon those files and the leaks began to trickle, it wasn't just a scandal. It was a nuclear bomb. Imagine generals, ministers, and party bosses waking up to the horrifying possibility that their wives or daughters might be on the tape with this one man. That wasn't just betrayal. It was career-ending, life-threatening humiliation. This is why the case shook Equatorial Guinea more than any embezzlement scandal ever could. Let's be honest, embezzlement is practically the national pastime there. The country is one of the richest in Africa thanks to oil, yet most people live in poverty, abject poverty while the ruling class buys mansions in Spain and fleet of Rolls Royces. But Engonga's steps cut deeper. They exposed the elite's vulnerability. They stripped away the myth that the powerful are untouchable, showing them as weak, foolish, and ridiculous. Dictatorships can survive corruption. They cannot survive ridicule. Because once the people see their rulers as clowns, fear begins to fade. And this is where Engonga's arrogance becomes tragic. He probably thought he was untouchable too. That's the only explanation for why he would keep such a vast collection of compromising evidence. Maybe he thought it gave him leverage. Maybe he was too addicted to the thrill to stop. Or maybe he was simply delusional, thinking his power and connections would shield him forever. But power in systems like this is a trap. The moment you embarrass the wrong people, you are not an insider anymore. You are an expendable example. So, the courts handed him 8 years. The official charge, embezzlement and abuse of office. The real reason? He embarrassed the ruling party by turning their private lives into public blue movies. He didn't just steal money. He stole dignity, and in authoritarian regimes, that's a capital offense. The lesson here is simple, and it applies far beyond Equatorial Guinea. In corrupt systems, theft is forgiven, loyalty is rewarded, but humiliation, that's the one thing they will never pardon. Because humiliation doesn't just hurt egos, it cracks the illusion of power that keeps dictatorships alive. Engonga, in his reckless obsession, became a mirror that reflected the regime's absurdity back at itself. And once the mirror shattered, the only way to contain the damage was to lock him away. So, the next time you hear that someone in Equatorial Guinea was jailed for corruption, remember this story. Because sometimes the real crime isn't what they tell you in court. Sometimes the real crime is what happens behind closed doors, or in this case, in front of a camera. And as always, this is Zimwaves TV, where we don't just report the news, we address it, expose it, and show you just how ridiculous power can be when arrogance collides with reality. Don't forget to subscribe because the circus never ends, and we'll be here to narrate every act.